Hello everyone, Sunderek here. In today's video, I'll be telling you everything you need to know about Eula before her release. That includes her power level, is she beginner friendly, her damage potential, and I'll also be serum crafting some teams for Eula. Hopefully with all the information, you'll be able to decide whether you should pull for her or not. Before we get started, I'm new to YouTube. If you like the content, please consider subscribing. Your subscription will help me a lot in growing my channel. Thank you. Now let's get started. First of all, Eula is a 5-star Cryo Claymore character. She is the second 5-star Claymore character to join Genshin, the first one being Diluc. Her ascension requires Crystalline Bloom, which you can get from the Cryo Hypostasis located in Dragonspine. She needs Dandelion Seeds as the overworld material, and she needs Shivada Jade, which you can get from either of the Cryo bosses, both the Cryo Registry and the Cryo Hypostasis. And for her character ascension materials, the last one, she needs Masks from Helios. Her talent requires the Resistance Book series, and her talent ascension material for any ascension past level 6 is the Dragon Lord's Crown, which you can get from the Big Geo Dragon, which is a new boss. As for her ascension stats, she ascends with critical damage, which is the overall best stats in-game a DPS can ascend with, other than their own respective elemental damage. At level 90, she has the raw stats of 13,226 HP, 342 attack, 751 defense, and 88.4% critical damage, 5% critical rate. So stats wise, she is above average even in 5 stars, and in combination with the very high critical base, that gives her a solid support for her potential as a DPS. Now onto her skills. Her normal attack is called Favonius Bladework Edo. It has 5 strikes, however the 3rd and 5th strike will have a double hit, so in total she'll be doing 7 hits if everything lands on the enemy. At level 8, one cycle of 7 hits will do around 946% damage, which is very high in terms of damage multiplier rates. And in my personal opinion, her auto style is smoother than Diluc's, but it might just be of the fact that she does 2 extra hits, so the overall animation takes shorter and looks smoother. Now onto her elemental skill. It is called Ice Tide Vortex. So classic to most DPSs, her elemental skill has 2 modes, the tap mode and the hold mode. When you tap her elemental skill, it has 4 seconds cooldown. Level 8 would provide 234% cryo damage bonus. On hit, it will create a stack of Grimheart, which is her personal character mechanics like Blood Blossom for Hu Tao and Riptide for Child. The Grimheart can be created every 0.3 seconds and can have a max of 2 stacks. Having an active Grimheart would increase the resistance of interruption and defense. Defense would increase by 30% per stack. When you hold her E, the skill cooldown would increase to 10 seconds. Level 8 would deal 393 cryo damage and would instantly consume all Grimhearts. If any Grimheart is consumed, each Grimheart stack would decrease the physical and cryo resistance of nearby enemies from 16 to 25% for 7 seconds, depends on your level. Each Grimheart will also summon 1 Ice World brand, which deals 1-time cryo damage to the enemies. And if you have 2 stacks active, that would be equal to 393 base damage from the skill, plus 2 stacks of 154% damage, which gives you a total of 701% damage. Again, very high multipliers. So from this setup, the most optimal way to use her elemental skill to charge up her burst is to tap, and hold, then repeat. Because this way, when you do the holding of her E, it will consume both Grimheart stacks and do the max damage. Even though only one of the 2 Ice World brands will result in the debuff time, the debuff timer will not be double for having 2 stacks of Grimheart. However, Ice World brand can still interact with her ult, which is why you want to use both stacks at the same time. Now onto her ultimate, her elemental burst, called the Glacial Illumination. It has a 20 seconds cooldown, it has a 80 energy requirement. So her ultimate is a little complicated, there are many parts. So first of all, initially she deals a strike of critical damage AoE to surrounding enemies. Afterwards, a Lightfall sword will be created that follows around. The sword will last 7 seconds or when Yuna is switched off field. During that 7 seconds or whenever less than 7 seconds Yuna is on the field, Yuna's resistance to interruption is increased. And whenever Yuna uses any form of attack, auto, elemental skill, elemental burst, or even the Ice Whirlbrand as mentioned before, the sword will charge up by 1 stack. There are a maximum of 30 stacks for the Lightfall sword, and when the duration of 7 seconds ends or when Yuna switches out, the Lightfall sword will strike, dealing massive physical damage, which is a combination of the base damage plus a multiplier times all the stacks. At level 8, 10 stacks would result in a 393 of base damage from the burst, plus 627 from the sword base attack, plus 128 times 10 stacks, which would result in a total of around 2300% damage. Again, it is broken. The numbers are used here because for a C0 Yuna, it is practically impossible to stack up to 30 stacks, so 10 stack would be a very safe estimate for the lower bounds of the damage. This ultimate is very powerful, again, as you saw from the damage multipliers. However, its biggest drawback is that after casting the ultimate, Yuna has to stay on the field for 7 seconds to gain the maximum potential from the ultimate, which means from this skill alone, this limits her as in the position of a DPS. Now let's talk about her passives. Her passives are actually very useful as well. The first one is called Rolling Time. If both stacks of Grimheart are consumed during a hold elemental skill, an additional Lightfall sword will be created, which strikes immediately and deals 50% of the critical damage from the base damage of the light sword of the ultimate. This light sword will also count as a single stack towards the ultimate light sword, and this again adds the emphasis on the tap hold mechanic, which means you want to always have full stacks of Grimheart before you use your elemental skill holding. Her second passive is called Wellspring of Warlust. It allows her to reset the cooldown of her elemental skill whenever after you casting her elemental burst. It also additionally gains 1 Grimheart, 1 stack of Grimheart. So this allows for an additional quicker smaller cycle. After you cast her ultimate, you would like to immediately tap her elemental skill, which then fully charges the 2 stacks of Grimheart, 1 from casting the burst and 1 from tapping the elemental skill. And then you will want to wait for 4 seconds for the cooldown, and then you can hold and dish out the most amount of damage for her elemental skills. Third passive talent is Aristocratic Introspection. It is similar to Xingqiu's talent. When crafting books, she has a 10% chance to double them instead of Xingqiu, who has a higher chance of returning the materials. A summary for her damage output style. She is generally played around her E most of the time. She is a DPS, a main DPS, mostly dealing physical damage, and because again of the limit of her Q, making her having to stand 7 seconds on the field after dealing damage, she is not well played as a support. Now let's briefly touch on her constellations. I know a lot of you probably won't be going for constellations, so I'll go through this section very quickly. For her C1, after a Grimheart stack is consumed, physical damage bonus is increased by 30% for 6 seconds. This can stack, and this actually can stack up to 3 times, making the maximum 18 seconds. It does not increase the physical damage increase, it only increases the duration. This gives significant damage boost to her autos. As a physical damage DPS, her main source of damage, apart from the ultimate light sword, will be coming from her auto attacks. And this can actually stay active most of the time. Let's do some base mask. If we follow the tap hold pattern, 4 seconds cooldown, of elemental skill, plus 4 seconds cooldown of the second elemental skill, plus 10 seconds cooldown of the third one, would equal a total of 18 seconds cooldown. And after that, she will gain 2 stacks, which automatically makes a stack at 12 seconds. So as you can see, there's only 6 seconds of downtime. That is not even to mention that after casting her ult, she basically gets a free charge. So this passive can be active most of the time, which is very nice. Now her second constellation. The holding part of her elemental skill also has the cooldown decreased to 4 seconds instead of 10 seconds. Now this was very useful during Yuna's beta testing where her passive of resetting cooldown did not exist. However, now it's not as useful, because after you cast her ultimate and you tap the E, then you would like to hold the E, right? So after you hold her E, there will be a 10 seconds cooldown. However, normally how you play, you would like, at this point, you would probably want to swap to your other characters like your elemental reaction person or your shielder or your healer to cast their ultimates and skills. And when that for all these 3 other characters are done and you come back, the 10 seconds of the skill cooldown will probably already be over or very close. So this would be more of a constellation that is useful in overworld exploration or in domains where you can only play as one character. However, if you have a team of 4, this would not be very useful. Her C3 and C5 are increasing the levels of her skill and burst, so I'll not touch on that. C4, the Lightfall Swords from her ultimate burst and for having 2 stacks of Grimheart consumed would deal 20% increased damage against opponents with 50 less percent HP. It is not guaranteed to pop, right? You cannot easily control enemies' health to be under 50%. However, it is a good damage boost. In my opinion, C2 is enough. However, it's a good damage boost. As for her C6, it is her biggest damage spike. Lightfall Swords will start with 5 stacks instead of 0 stacks, and all forms of attack, auto, elemental skill, elemental burst, and even the Lightfall Swords from holding her elemental skill would have a 50% chance to double the stacks. That means in order to charge it full, you would need 30 minus 5, which is 25 stacks, divided by 1.5. So you would need roughly, on average, 17 hits to charge the max of her stacks. Of course, even with C6, it is still hard to charge up her stacks under most circumstances, but it makes it more doable than a C0 Yuna. Now let's do a little bit of math. Assuming if you're able to get the max stacks, level 8, her ultimate, after using the max stack, would have a total damage of 393 initial cryo damage, plus 627 initial physical damage from the Lightfall Sword, and on top of that, 30 stacks of 128%, which gets you a total of 393 cryo damage and 4,467% critical damage, which again, the numbers are insane if you're able to get her up to that stacks. So in conclusion, I would recommend, if you have the ability, to go for constellations C1, maybe C2, and C6. Now let's move on to her artifacts. Her artifact choices are very obvious for veteran players. You would want to choose the 4-piece Pale Flame set, as the set is specifically designed for her. She can easily get 2 stacks of the buff and having the physical damage bonus of 50% increase, and on top of that having 18% attack increase. So as for the main stats, you would want attack sense, physical damage cup, and critical damage or critical rate headpiece. Now if you're still working on her artifacts of 4-piece Pale Flame, some artifacts to consider as an intermediate step would be any of the 2 between 2-piece Gladiator, 2-piece Pale Flames, or 2-piece Bloodstained to maximize her attack or physical damage bonus. As for beginners who are below level 45, assume you do not farm any artifacts domains, the set you would like to use is either 2-piece Exile or 2-piece Scholar for the 20% energy recharge increase, because she would need that for her ultimate. And the other 2-piece set you want to wear is either Gladiator for general attack increase, Berserker if you're lacking a bit of critical rate, and resolution of Sojourner, which also increases attack. It's exactly same as Gladiator. And if you happen to have a physical damage goblet, as long as it's not a 1-star artifact, I would highly recommend using that in your goblet slot, as it would greatly increase your damage. Now moving on to weapons. For 5 stars, Wolf's Gravestone is still the best choice in terms of damage. Songs of Broken Pines is best in terms of aesthetics. However, the 12 seconds uptime, 20 seconds cooldown is not very suitable for Yuna in the sense, because after she casts her ultimate, she needs to wait for 7 seconds before the Lightfall Sword deals damage. So a lot of the times the Lightfall Sword will not be able to eat the bonus from this, and then the 20 seconds cooldown is a little too long for Yuna, as she will normally be off the field for less than 20 seconds. However, the passive does increase attack speed, so it is very good for Yuna if you want to purely stack up those stacks on the Lightfall Sword. The other option to consider is Skyward Pride, mainly for the energy recharge substats. However, it does also create a vacuum blade, and that does count as physical damage, so that can get Yuna's physical damage bonus, which is a nice cherry on top. As for 4 stars, of course the Battle Pass weapon Serpent Spine is the best choice. However, if you are a free-to-play player, the Claymore from the Blackcliff set and also the Lithic blade, if you get your hands on one, those are good choices as well. If you are very free to play, as you do not buy anything from the Starglitter shop or you do not wish on the weapon banner, the Dragon Spine Claymore would work with Yuna as well. Now let's talk a little bit about her team comps. Like Razor, Yuna needs to have a lot of field time to do damage, so that essentially blocks out the path of building her as a quick swap team, because that will not fit her playstyle. As for because she deals physical damage and she is cryo element herself, you would want one electro character to keep up with the superconduct for 40% physical resistance down on enemies. Currently there are 5 electro characters in game, taking out Kachin, Razor. There are 3 left. All 3 can support Yuna rather well. It depends on mostly what you need. Fischl provides the best in terms of coverage of Electro, because alls can deal Electro most of the time. And on top of that, if you really want to build off meta, Fischl can wear the 4-piece Tenacity of the Minimalist to further buff Yuna's damage. Beidou is best if you want to have a shield for Yuna. However, if you are building Beidou as a DPS to support Yuna, her energy recharge would be a big problem you want to focus on. Lisa can also support Yuna as well. I know not a lot of people play her, but her ultimate can actually put debuffs on enemies, so she is also very useful here. But again, Lisa's ultimate also requires 80 energy, so energy recharge on Lisa would need to be very high as well if you want to keep up her ultimate. Now those are the 2 first positions you bring Yuna and the Electro character. The 3rd position, if you did not bring Beidou, you might want to consider bringing a shielder. Zhongli is of course the best one, because the most uptime for his shield, so you rarely need to swap out to re-shield again. Plus his shield brings debuff, including cryo and physical debuff on enemies, so that is automatically a bonus for Yuna. Plus, Zhongli can get swapped in for petrification, which allows you to not dodge and deal more damage meanwhile. Diona is also very useful here as a cryo battery. I've mentioned that before in my Diona guide build. Also, the good thing about Diona's shield is that it increases attack speed, so it is good for Yuna to speed up those stacks when charging for her ultimate. And finally, the other shielder, Xingyan, is good as well here. However, Xingyan's skill tends to be slow, so you want to use it as a one-time melt proc. Noelle is not mentioned here because Noelle's shield time is rather low and her shield mostly used for herself for healing purposes, so she's not too recommended here. As for the 4th position, you can bring a utility person. You can either bring a healer like Bennett, which is good, Chi-Chi as a battery as well, Or you can bring a elemental application person like Xingqiu to allow Yuna to basically freeze on hit and also shatter at the same time for more damage. Or you can bring a shield popping person, especially for the Abyss. You can bring someone specifically to pop a form of shield you would like to. The other comp I would like to share is called the Firework Yuna comp. It is derived from Child's Firework comp. Here you would swap out Child for Yuna. In this case, this comp works as well because it allows for a lot of superconduct, and on top of that, you can also swap the utility person to Xingqiu, and in this case, it will still retain the original electro charge reaction. On top of that, it would add a lot more of freezing, superconduct, and shatter for most amount of damage. So in conclusion, Yuna is clearly a power creeped version from Razor, but of course that's okay because Yuna is a 5-star and Razor is a 4-star that has been in-game since launch. Yuna's ultimate's mechanic of charging up allows it to deal significantly more damage than Razor. Her cryo allows her to play the possibility of melt instead of overload. And she is like Ganyu. She is very strong in terms of the damage multipliers on paper, and I believe the damage multipliers will probably not be surpassed in a while. As for new players, she is very good first DPS to pick up because her damage would be very high and that would help you clear a lot of the early content. And again, her situation is similar to Child right now. She is not necessary for any content, but having her might make certain domains easier. That is all I have for you today. Thank you very much for watching. Again, if you like the content, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you and have a nice day.